Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a really interesting knife overview to share with you guys. I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't carry this one. I like to, make sure and point that out. I'm a knife collector, and the vast majority of the stuff that I showcase on this channel, I at least try to throw in my pocket and use for like little tiny things, right? I don't go out and try to survive in the wilderness with this stuff. I just put it in my pocket and use it the way that I would any other pocket knife, just like a regular Joe, because that's what I'm doing with that stuff. But I also buy knives for my personal collection, having handled so many wild and crazy things. I kind of go after that stuff, like the stuff that is so far beyond what you would normally expect from a pocket knife. That just interests me infinitely. And Reate's creation of the T1000 is definitely in that category for me. This is the new Reate T1000 V2, and this particular version, one of the most beautiful satin DLC finishes that I have ever seen. This knife is so absolutely ridiculous. If you've watched my channel for any amount of time, you could take one look at this and go, that is a Metal Complex knife, and you would be right. This is definitely a Metal Complex knife. Thank you so much to me for buying it. They did not, normally I say thanks to whoever sent it, right? I bought this. I paid full price for it via DLT Trading. So thank you to DLT Trading for existing. I think they still have one or two variations of this knife left, so I'll link it down in the description so that you guys can check it out if you want to. And thanks so much to my patrons for supporting me. So anyways, this was a knife that I purchased for my collection. If you are not familiar with this territory of the knife world, right, and you're thinking, people collect knives? What do you mean? You bought a knife and you're not going to use it? Yup. Welcome to my channel. Sometimes I do that, right? The irony is that this thing is ridiculously overbuilt. It absolutely has those overbuilt characteristics, right? A lot of it is just creating more, it's like cumbersome. You're essentially carrying around excess weight and not getting the equivalent trade-off in utility, right? So are you gaining a really meaningful benefit with this knife, right? And its extra locking system, which we'll cover, and its overly thick blade and its DLC coating. And I mean, I suppose there might be some very, very specific circumstances where a knife like this really would perform in a way that is exactly what that person needed right then and there in that moment. But I very much doubt that that is a common. In fact, I know that if that exists, it is not a likely circumstance to be in. Reate knows that their potential customers are full-on knife enthusiasts that love the extra, that love the excess that's just there for the sake of excess. But they also make tools underneath all of the craziness and the embellishments. It is a tool, right? And if you wanted to carry this 10.5 ounce monster knife, it's probably one of the more wieldy of the beasts out there. There are a lot of huge monster crazy knives, right? And this one is on the more reasonable side. Now, versus a regular pocket knife, no, this is an absolute behemoth. It is a monstrosity. The vast majority of people will find this knife far too big for EDC. But yeah, I didn't buy it for any of that. I bought it because I love what they did here. So we're going to go ahead, but I wanted to make sure that you guys knew, right, that this is not a review that's based on like carry time, right? There's actually plenty of testing videos out there. Most of you are familiar with Reate knives. They know how to make a frame lock, right? But there are some testing videos out there of the T1000 specifically, and it is a very robust and capable knife. I wouldn't expect it to, stand up to the same type of abuse that like a cold steel triad lock can take, but definitely more than your average pocket knife. I also have the original T1000 here, and we're going to talk about that. But yeah, let's go ahead and move through specs here real quick. Overall length of the T1000 V2, it's still a 9-inch knife with a 4-inch blade or very, very close. I think it's about 3.95. Your cutting edge comes in about 3.65. Let's do some size comparisons. Any custom skills you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and others. So up against something like the AD10, you can see here that this thing is huge, definitely. And I know, anytime that we have a big, robust knife and we have a locking system that suggests in some way that it is strong, right? Nowhere in Reate's catalog or any of their advertising does it say this lock that we've created is as strong or stronger than the Triad lock. But to Triad lock cult members, that doesn't matter. If it exists and there's even the slightest hint of strength, they will come out of the ductwork to tell you that the Triad lock is still superior. So calm yourselves. Calm yourselves. The lock is definitely substantial. As far as like how strong it actually is, I don't know. But basically the way that this works is it's still a frame lock, right? It's just a massive, like it's obviously a super robust frame lock. Reate does a great job with the frame lock, right? And under normal circumstances, a much thinner frame lock will still be more than enough for the vast majority of people doing normal knife tasks, right? We also have an absolutely massive, nearly 1/4-inch stock of M390 with huge external stops. So definitely robust for a frame lock. Then on top of that, you have these 2 additional pins right here that you push in, and it acts as an additional stop for the blade. So even if the frame lock were to disengage, the blade cannot move until these are pushed back out. And how do you do that? We've got this little spring-loaded spacer right here. You push up and it kicks them back out, which is interesting. It's unique, right? It's not the first system that has, like a secondary pin. But those are usually like, if you think of like Max Ace knives where they have that extra pin, like or Midgard's Messer knives, right? It like detaches from the blade and you have to keep track of it or put it on your keys and then screw it in. These are just right here. There's a video out there of somebody like batoning with this knife, which I think is stupid. I don't think you should baton with a folding knife in general, even if it's a Triad lock, right? I mean, I think you should just use the right tool. A fixed blade or a hatchet would actually be the most ideal, if you're trying to like split wood. But people have a fascination with like pushing pocket knives to their limits. So there's a video out there of somebody doing that, and I guess what happens is these pins like slowly walk themselves back out. So the knife is plenty substantial. But like if you really, really have to baton with it, like if you find yourself in, oh my gosh, like I must baton and this is all I have. Well, that's what you can expect, I guess. In any other normal knife circumstance, this is probably going to be so unbelievably overkill for whatever you're doing. It doesn't even matter if it's not quite as strong as the Triad lock, because that thing is so overkill. It's like in another universe, right? Every other part of the knife will break before the lock does. And so it's like I always, I kind of poke fun at it. The Triad lock will be the last remaining functioning thing on the knife. So you just have just like a ball of shrapnel and a functioning Triad lock. So whatever side of the fence you're on there, I guess the main point I'm making here is it doesn't really matter, right? It is definitely more substantial than your average, pocket knife. And it's much more cool factor, I think, than anything else. But very big, way bigger than something like the AD10, and also way thicker, like way thicker. 236 thousandths on this guy. But anyways, it was a lengthy size comparison there. Let's put it up against the Spyderco PM2. Where is that thing today? Oh, there it is. Gosh, this knife is I just cannot see this knife. Spyderco PM2 and Spyderco Para 3. Yep, it's huge. And then let's put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. Still absolutely huge. How's the action? Is it any different than the Reate T1000 V1, which I own right here? I have a special edition of this knife that came from Crane's Cutlery. I think there were only 30 made in Zircotai. This guy is 3V and does not have a recurve, has a straight blade, which I kind of like. Normally I don't like recurves, but I feel like the recurve here gives it a little more personality. Whatever. This guy's in 3V, and this guy's in M390. How did they heat treat this absolutely absurd chunk of M390? 61 to 62. Wow. That's great. The geometry of the blade is so unbelievably thick, even with a hollow grind, right? I guess it kind of matters, but, you know, it's not going to be an efficient slicer. Like, can it slice? Yeah, absolutely. It's just an incredibly thick blade, right? So you can still slice with it, no problem. And same with the straight edge version, it's in 3V. But if you're cutting something that's really thick and really dense, I mean, make no mistake, this is a fully usable object. It's just a cumbersome usable object. If you're cutting into something like cardboard or rubber or thick styrofoam, you're going to push that whole massive wedge of steel through that stuff, right? And so your HRC, that's great. Like, it's a premium steel and it's got the right heat treat, but you're also like having to push this huge wedge of material through what you're cutting. So a thinner blade, a much thinner blade, like your average thin whatever pocket knife that probably doesn't have the best steel in the world, and it's probably not even heat treated optimally, will perform better simply because it has better geometry, right? For cutting tasks. Now, if you're talking abuse or borderline abuse, right? You're doing like chopping, I guess, or you're trying to like pry with it, or you're trying to push like the tip to, well, yeah, the geometry of the blade is definitely more robust than your average pocket knife. So even though it is like, you know, really high HRC M390, the whole thing is just stupidly thick. I mean, even out at the tip, like it's just thick. It looks like it gets really thin, but look how much material is out there. It's crazy. Obviously, the 3V one is probably better suited for this style of knife because 3V is a much tougher steel. It's not going to hold an edge nearly as long, but I just don't know exactly what like for people who are actually going to take these things out and use them, what is the appropriate steel on a super thick folding knife with a short blade? I mean, you are limited in terms of your utilitarian range, right? What's the appropriate steel? I don't know. We want to see a super steel. That's why it's funny, right? I'm kind of halfway asking, halfway poking fun at the question. We know we want a special premium steel on our $500, $600 pocket knives. But when we get into this territory of weirdness, we don't know why we want what we want. We just know that it needs to be premium and it needs to be heat treated correctly. So whatever the answer is, you know, okay, whatever. This is 61, 62 M390, which is great. How is the action on this knife? Well, you know what? I thought, why would it be any different than on the T1000 V1? T1000 V1 is, man, it's insane because it's this big, brutish, you know, almost like Warhammer 40K themed pocket knife. And you pull that flipper tab. God, that is one of the most satisfying, just impossibly good, because it's so massive. The blade is absolutely huge. You pull that flipper tab and you expect something to be not perfect. The detent, or maybe the pivot's not smooth because this is big goofy thing. And no, you forget, oh yeah, that's right. It's a Reate. So that thing is kablam! It just blasts out there and it feels amazing. I was so impressed with that. This knife somehow is even better. It's all of what I expected. Plus, it's got the right detent, you know, considering the weight and mass of the blade. Plus, the pivot is smoother. I don't know. Look at this. Oh, man, it's even better. This thing is crazy. It is so good. It is so satisfying. The wow factor of flipping a knife with this big and this thick of a blade is off the charts. It's really great. I love this. Can you use the hole to reverse flick it? Maybe. It's just so, it's not in the optimal position, right? Is it positioned differently than on the V1? Yes, it is. That's one of the subtle differences here. You can see there's a little more access here with this guy. This guy has no access whatsoever. There's some other little tiny differences. I mean, this knife remained largely unchanged. I think they just carved out that area a little bit more on this guy so you can kind of get in there, but it's not ideal and it certainly isn't satisfying. It's a little bit scary, right? Can you use the external stops to deploy that? If you can, my thumb's not strong enough. I can't get it in the right position. You know, I would recommend you just use the flipper tab because that feels perfect. It feels absolutely perfect, even with being slightly XM18 hook shaped, right? It feels amazing to flip this knife. I would recommend that that's how you do that. But it does feel better than the version 1. So there you go. Let's do carry profile. Thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. This knife is an absolute behemoth. I don't have to put it in my pocket to know that it's going to be too big for the average person. If you are an actual giant, if you're a giant person, then something like this might not feel as big to you as the average person, right? To the vast majority of people on this planet, this will feel hilarious in your pocket. And I've put this one in my pocket, so I know. It's huge. It's way too big to gain the benefit you get from it. It's so small in comparison to the amount of object that you're carrying, right? So yeah, it's fun. Like, it's cool, you know, that you carry this like big ridiculous thing, and if it puts a smile on your face, then do it. You know, you like do what makes you happy. It will fit in your pocket. It's not like the giant ultra lengthy Midgard's Messer or some of those cartoonishly huge cold steel knives, which some people still manage to get in their pockets. So yeah, it's got that, but it is very, very thick and very, very heavy, and you will notice it, right? If you absolutely want to dedicate to it, you will adapt to it slowly, but it is a lot to commit to on a daily basis. So jeans, work pants, cargo shorts, right? This is not like fitted pant, you know, appropriate pocket knife, right? Or dress pant. Wearing dress pants, right? Like fitted dress pants and trying to mash this thing in there. Yeah, you're going to be uncomfortable, right? So, yeah, most people will find this far too large. Let's do weight. So this is a upgraded version of this knife. There's a few different versions with the V2. Obviously, I had to go with the DLC. You can get it non-DLC, but I had to go with the DLC, which we'll talk more about. But this is DLC titanium, DLC satin M390, and then we have crystal tie accents, which you can kind of see right here, the crystallized titanium accents. Very, very cool. This is a little bit more of an expensive process, and eventually I'll do a video or a short where I explain the difference between crystal tie and like your regular titanium and your anodizing, but it's a little bit more expensive, and we don't see it on a whole lot of stuff at all. But I feel like we're going to start seeing it a lot more in the production knife world. So you pay a little bit more for these accents. You can also get this in zirconium or just plain DLC. You can also get like the satin, the plain satin one with the zirconium accents are just like plain, right? This is the one that I wanted, and this was the most expensive version, the most expensive standard version that they released on DLT Trading. I have no doubt that somewhere there was a super special version of this with probably Zircotie, a lot like my V1, right? I think there was even a version of it where the entire frame was Zircotie, and who knows what the blade was made out of. That would obviously be substantially more expensive. But for the standard versions of this knife, essentially that's what you were looking at there. And a lot of it. I mean, there's enough material here for people that want to reduce the price tag to simply the materials used, right? Okay, there's enough titanium and M390 here to at least make 2 premium knives, right? So if you need to oversimplify it like that, this thing's right on the money for value. But there's a lot more to it, which is really what makes this knife so impressive, even if the vast majority of what you're getting here is actually working against you, right? It's a very impressive object to exist, for Reate to have made. But we'll go ahead and weigh it. I know when I get really excited about this stuff, like the reviews and the videos, like just become incredibly elongated because there's just so much that I want to say. But the weight on this guy, probably 10.5 ounces. Yeah, 10.5 ounces. Is that different than this one? Yeah, I remember this one being a little heavier, and somebody pointed out to me that the reason is because the most likely the vast majority of the weight reduction came from, sometimes this is part of the thing with this. Sometimes these guys are pushed in. You'll go to flip it, or they're not quite all the way out. can really dick up your index finger that way. But there's a decent amount of material pulled out of the blade for the recurve. That's most likely where the weight reduction is coming from. So yeah, that's a lot. 10.5 ounces is a lot of weight for a pocket knife. I would consider about 3.5 to 4 ounces to be, let's say the average pocket knife probably weighs about 3.5 to 4 ounces, right? So this is way more, way more. The hardware check, yeah, sure. We'll go ahead and figure out exactly whether you can get my tools. I'll get my tools out. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. I bet you that pivot is at least a T10. I'll bet you. That is a T10. The body screws. Oh, that's a T10. That's a T10. What about the thumb studs? That's a T10. These are all T10. That's great. There's a lot. How about the pocket clip screws? T10. That's what I love to say. How about the lock bar insert screw? Oh, T10. The whole thing is a T10. So T10. You want to take this apart? It looks like it would be really complicated, but it's not. It just has a lot of screws, right? So yeah, if you want to do it, just T10. You're good to go. That's great. Let's go ahead and measure the blade stock thickness. As far as I know, they did not change. It's just shy of 1/4 inch. So you are looking at 236 thousandths. So very thick. Okay, meat and potatoes time. This is, I love silly overbuilt knives. I've got plenty of like good, straightforward utilitarian knives that I enjoy carrying and using, right? But I love my big, crazy, ridiculous, for the sake of being ridiculous. I love that. I also love locking systems and mechanisms that are not typical. I also like it when the theme of irony is implemented. In this case, we have this brutish, cumbersome, ridiculous object that kind of works against itself, but it is made like the manufacturing complexity and accuracy is so over the top, right? And like the polishing on the blade, the attention to detail. I mean, this thing is made, the end result is an object that is so unbelievably premium. It's funny, right? The irony of this is so obvious. And for the people who get it, right? It's like you're in on it. Like Reate knows, and Reate knows that you know, right? And then you got everybody else on the outside just absolutely, baffled by its existence, thinking that they need to jump in and save us, right? They clearly don't. They're being fooled. They don't realize that these elements actually hinder the user. Oh, we know, but thanks. Thanks, we appreciate it all the way out there from the outer rims of this strange knife world that we have existed in for a long time. I love this. This checks so many boxes, and it really is. You pick this thing up and you hold it, and it's just different, right? The aura of this thing is different than other overbuilt knives, and obviously much different than other pocket knives in general. It is such a weird combination. It's kind of like, it's almost like somebody taking a Ferrari and putting a lift kit on it. Like incredibly stupid, but also just, I mean, the end result is something that would be hyper expensive to do, right? Like, it's cool. And, if you really did need to use this thing, like I'm sure that it would stand up to most things that you would put it through, like most regular knife tests. Yeah, no problem. And I do think that these T1000s are substantially more robust than the average knife. You don't need to spend nearly that much money to get the durability though, right? That's not really, that's I guess one element of what you're paying for here, but you can get a durable knife for like $50, right? You can buy cold steel. Again, that's probably the way to go. If value to you is just durability, yeah, go buy a cold steel, like problem solved. You don't need to waste any more time here. Like that was figured out 2 decades ago, right? That's where you should go. Don't waste any more time, right? But if it's like the durability elements is kind of interesting to you, but then also, right, we're going really, really overboard with the like thick titanium, thick M390, the beautifully luxurious pivot action, the incredible DLC finish. This is so nice. It's like satin and tumbled. Not quite as reflective. I'm trying to get this little teeny tiny little, at some point I think I probably got excited and like spit on it or something. But it's not quite as reflective as like the Kaiser Milita, right? That's like a high satin, like a hyper polished satin DLC. But in a way, this is more satisfying. I don't know exactly what it is. It's very, very smooth to the touch, and it's like I said, it's somewhere in between like a high reflectivity tumbled finish and a satin finish, and then with DLC applied to it, and it is just absolutely beautiful, and it's perfectly even everywhere. It's the same look everywhere. On top of that, you have this incredible recurve compound tanto. It's just absolutely menacing. And the fact that it's so thick, it just adds to that. I mean, it looks like some sort of Batman knife, right? The jimping is a little bit different on the new version versus the old version, just slightly more, I guess, wider in the cutouts, right? The spine also, like the area where it's a swedge or it turns into the spine, like the flat part of the spine, it's wider on the new one. So that's a difference there. And outside of that, I can't really tell. I mean, I don't think there really is any other difference outside of just the access to the opening hole. The shape of the opening hole is also slightly different. It's wider on the right side than it is the left side. On the old version, it was a perfect oval. So you can see there's a little bit different. I don't know. I don't think there's any other elements here. For being such a huge knife, it is hilariously comfortable. Like I can feel all the different surfaces and all the changes in the surfaces, and it looks like it would be uncomfortable to hold, but it's not. There's so much material, and every edge has a little chamfer or bevel on it, right? So there's a lot of different surface textures and things like that, but everything is nice and soft, and it's so thick that it's pretty comfortable, right? The choke up position is also really, really nice. And the jimping, smooth, it's not aggressive, but it's so deep that you really can make use of it, right, if you really want to. Love this system back here. I think this is cool. I play with this all the time. Push those two things in and then kick them back out. It's got its own fun, weird little fidget factor, right? It's like a built-in whack-a-mole system. Many times I've had these in and not realized it and gone to flip it, and like smashing your finger off of that flipper tab is painful, right? Same thing with going to disengage it. Sometimes I'll have them in and I'll go like this and I'll be like, why isn't the blade moving, right? So you really have to be cognizant of what's happening, or it's like you're expecting it to be locked out and it's not, and you go to move the lock bar and the blade comes down on your finger. You gotta pay attention, right? It says Reate right here. I wish that they didn't do that. I wish that it just didn't say that at all, right? The M390 over here I think is fine. Why did they go with M390 instead of 3V? I don't know. I mean, again, I don't know what the appropriate blade steel is at this geometry, because this geometry is so inappropriate for a pocket knife, right? No matter what it is that you would be doing with this thing, there's a better tool. and a better steel for that better tool, right? That better knife, I guess, it's just, I don't know. This is optimized for nothing except entertaining weird knife enthusiasts. And, you know, with that being most likely the main goal, they did a great job. This puts the biggest smile on my face. I don't care that I have no use for this. I love it. I think it's so cool. Backspacer are absolutely beautiful. The crystal tie back here. We have that little lanyard hole. Why there's no lefty mounting position? No idea. Why the pocket clip is so long? I don't know, right? It's a little bit of a fight to get it in and out of your pocket, just based on my experience with this guy. But, okay, I mean, it's a fight to carry the darn thing, so should be accommodating for lefties, though. Lockout, I'm sure you could guess. Even without engaging the 2 pins here, it's completely and totally solid. There's no lock stick or anything like that. There's no pivot lash. It's unbelievably smooth in here. And God, that detent is ridiculous. It's a strong detent, but man, the leverage you get off of that flipper tab is insane. This knife has recoil. The amount of force that blade comes out with, gosh, it's absolutely wild. Here, whoops. Ah, that's what I'm talking about. It hurts. That was just me missing it. It's a heavy detent, but here, watch. Yeah, you can see it shakes my whole arm. One thing that bothers me, I don't know that I ever even realized it. I'm going to check that it is the case with this one. Yeah, it is. I can see it right there. So I changed this on the knife that I designed because I don't like it. The stops, these out here, I mean, like external stops are not a new thing, right? It's always, those have been a thing. You can see right here, these little housing areas, I think probably mitigate how much wear, or it's right there. It looks like a shadow, but this is the impact marks on the frame. That's just, nature of the beast. If the stops are external and they use the outside of the frame to stop, then you're going to get little marks. If on a blasted or tumbled or whatever titanium frame, you don't see it as much. On a DLC frame, it's not making nearly as much of a mark right here, and that's, again, because it has like specific housing areas. But in the closed position, it's also the stop on the frame, and this does not have a specific housing area for the stops in the closed position. And on both of these knives, there are little marks on the frame. This one not quite as noticeable. This one definitely noticeable. Definitely on my prototype for Excalibur, I noticed that this was happening, and I said, we got to change the closed position stop. It's got to be internal because I don't want that to be leaving a mark in such a noticeable area. It's not nearly as noticeable up here. It will eventually leave a mark up here, but no big deal. But down here, I see it, and it kind of bothers me because it's kind of messing up the perfectly consistent black finish here, the black coating. So I really wish that the knife had some sort of internal stop, which easily could have been implemented. Easily, right? There's a million different ways to do that. But it's not the case. That is literally the only thing that I don't like about it. This knife is going to, who this knife is for would have been determined just by looking at it, right? People reading the dimensions and everything. Like, if you're a overbuilt premium knife person, you definitely need a T1000 in your collection. If you love overbuilt, ridiculous, made with all the super premium this and that, if you love that type of knife, the Reate T1000 is right up your alley. For the other 99% of people on Earth, no, absolutely not. Of course I don't recommend this. This is ridiculous. A regular $50 pocket knife will do everything that this knife will do, except all of the stuff that, you're not likely to have to use a knife for, like batoning to save your life or prying the door off a bomb shelter or whatever. You're not going to have to do that, right? So a $50, if you're just looking for like a good utilitarian knife, obviously you don't need this. Nobody needs this, right? This is just an excessively overbuilt knife for the sake of being funny and ironic, right? But it is capable. So if you're into this stuff, yeah, it is so nice, right? Do I think $547, that's the base price, do I think that's justified for this knife? I paid $590 for this version. Do I think it's justified for this knife? Again, just materials alone? Yeah. But the materials and the build, all the little satisfaction elements, right? The wow factor, the finish, absolutely. I was happy to pay that. I love so many knives that are in this territory, right, are so undeserving of that price tag. But it's made in China. Yeah, even with it being made in China, this is such an impressive overbuilt knife, but it exists in such a specific category. It's going to be worth that for so few people, right? Whether it's for you or not, I'm not saying like it's only worth it to people who like it. No, it is factually an expensive thing to make. I think that they got that, like as far as the materials, the quality, the execution, right? Yeah, I think that that's it doesn't surprise me at all that this is where they landed on the price, right? But how many people are going to be willing to pay that much money for an object like this? Not very many people. And that makes sense, right? Specifically, if you are into knives like this, yeah, you'll love the T1000. Buy it. It'll put a huge smile on your face. For everybody else, no. Just get yourself a much more reasonable tool, right? I love this. Super happy with it. I think it's awesome. It'll be in my collection forever. I think they absolutely knocked it out of the park. I'm so impressed with Reate's ability to do a satin DLC. Please keep doing that. I hope we see that more from Reate. That's going to be it today, guys. Links for this guy down in the description. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex and on TikTok at the_metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.